The Gupta brothers left in 2018. Today is 2023. We still do not know how they left.
It's very clear that the Guptas are using whatever possible influence they could to make sure that they don't come to the country.
If it didn't succeed, because the documentation wasn't up to scratch, then someone is to blame.
They still have the ability to control people inside the system on the basis of aces they hold against them.
The Gupta brothers were from a fairly humble background in their native India. They hailed from the northern province in India of Uttar Pradesh. They came over into South Africa in 1993. The first of the brothers was Atul Gupta, who arrived in South Africa. They were a close-knit family. Their father had worked his way up as an owner of a store in India, and he had sent the family to India, to Africa rather, believing that this would be the next frontier of the big economic boom and business boom for people like them looking to make their mark. So Atul Gupta enters the country in 1993. We don't hear about the Gupta brothers really until much later.
So what sort of family they were? They were already a business family, but a family of very little consequence. These were young men, for the most part, in their 20s, by the way, 20s, I think at best in their early 30s.
Atul Gupta attempts to open a shoe store in Killarney. That doesn't go too well, neither does a boutique he opens a few years later, which does end up closing. However, one business that he starts, which is in computers and computer components, does pretty well. So by 1997, Atul Gupta, still an unknown person in South Africa, changes the name of that computer business rather, to Sahara Computers, which becomes the foundation of their empire in South Africa. So he starts a computer components related business, and that business does fairly better than his other businesses. By 1994, it's making just shy of 1.5 million rand. But what happens is that in the next 3 years, that particular business does so well that by 1997, he's rebranded it Sahara Computers. Now, of course, that's familiar to many South Africans. That's the name of their business empire, Sahara. And in those 3 years, it grows from a 1.5 million rand turnover to nearly 100 million rand by 1997. So something really remarkable happened in those 3 years. And in that time, their profile starts to rise and the rest of the family comes in and settles down and makes South Africa their business base.
So the Guptas came at a time when a lot of the ANC leaders were looking for financial sponsors for their personal lives. They were broke, they didn't have any money. And anybody who could facilitate any number of transactions, no matter the nature of those transactions was most welcome in the company of the leaders of the ANC.
So the Guptas started trying to get close to those in power from quite early on in their time in South Africa. Various reports allege that they tried to make contact with Thabo Mbeki and were indeed fairly successful in doing so and in meeting with him. However, President Mbeki was apparently quite discreet about that connection if it indeed did happen. His successor, Jacob Zuma, was less discreet. Atul Gupta said to the Sunday Times that the brothers met Zuma as early as 2002, 2003, when he was a guest at one of the annual Sahara functions. And of course, we know that from there, the brothers became a lot more blatant about mixing in those high-powered ANC circles.
I, Jacob Zuma, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, observe, uphold, and maintain the Constitution and all other law of the Republic.
I learned about the Guptas when I was still working in government. It was mainly corridor talk to say there are these brothers who are actually approaching various officials, ministers in government, demanding government contracts without following any due process. So that's the corridor talk that was taking place within government and also within the ruling party. I was in charge of the government communication system at the time and also responsible for the International Marketing Council, IMC, which is now known as Brand South Africa. I'd known about the demands they were making on government officials, and I was reluctant initially to meet them until one day I thought, I'm meeting other industry leaders, so I might as well just give them a hearing. And the most interesting part is that as I had agreed to meet them, they'd suggested that the meeting should take place at their house in Saxonwold. As I was driving out of my office in Pretoria to come to Joburg to meet them, I then get a call from President Zuma's office saying President Zuma wanted to talk to me. And he came on the line and he basically said that these Gupta brothers who need my help, I must go and actually meet with them and assist them. And I was surprised by the call because I'd already agreed to meet Ajay Gupta. And then I went to go to meet with him at his house in Saxonwold. Ajay Gupta was a very arrogant, very aggressive person who was talking to me in a very condescending tone. And basically, he was giving me an instruction to say I must transfer the total money budget that government was spending on advertising, transfer that budget to his company, soon to be established company, which was the New Age newspaper. And when I tried to tell him that, in fact, that's not how government works, I told him there has to be a procurement process. The budget doesn't sit with me within GCIS. He was not interested in that. He simply said, this is what I want you to do. It became very clear to me that the president was upset, or President Zuma was upset, and that's when he gave an instruction to the minister to remove me from the position. The support from Minister Chabane was phenomenal, because when the president instructed him to remove me from GCIS, he made it very clear to me that, in fact, he doesn't agree with the decision, but he had to implement it.
Duduzane Zuma then became a partner, the son of Jacob Zuma became a partner in this business, the IT. And then they expanded into every other type of business. They would go to Denel and the arms industry and demand certain portions of these businesses for themselves. They know that there's a particular type of technology which is very lucrative at Denel, and find ways of taking those things out and making them a private business. And they then went into the airlines and want certain routes, air routes, that these routes must be given to them. Just by asking President Zuma, and Zuma would issue the instruction, and the comrades would fall in line.
The Waterkloof scandal was probably the high point of the Guptas' notoriety in the country. The fact that they were able to have that plane land the way they did, kind of flouting multiple rules and regulations, was the high point of both their ability to do whatever they wanted in this country with very few consequences, but also increasing public dissatisfaction with what they were doing. The Waterkloof scandal was linked to this massive family wedding that was being thrown in our country, where a lot of government ministers were being invited and some even went. So what you saw there is, at that point, their influence was really high, but the public dissatisfaction with them was also equally high.
Members of the Gupta family offered me the position of Minister of Finance to replace the then Minister Nene. I rejected this out of hand. The basis of my rejection of their offer is that it makes a mockery of our hard-earned democracy, the trust of our people, and no one apart from the President of the Republic appoints ministers.
This was a terrifying kind of scenario. Clearly, there was a second decision-making body that sat outside both our actual government in South Africa and outside the ruling party structures, the ANC structures, and they seem to know things before many other people. And certain politicians like Mcebisi Jonas came forward to allege this. And they had offered him 600 million rand to make him the next finance minister, very confident that they could do so, and said to him they would give him 600,000 rand there and then in cash to show how serious they were. What did they want in return for this? They wanted access to government contracts. Their plan was to increase their slice of our total fiscus from 6 billion rand to 8 billion rand. Now, this was according to Jonas's testimony at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. He turned that down and he pushed back against them, and he said he was met with incredible anger, like how could he do this, because they were just used to getting their way.
We got involved in the investigation on the Guptas because there were complaints that were lodged with us. And because there was a complaint from a member of parliament and made under the Executive Members Ethics Act, the EMI, we had no option, because if somebody complained under the Public Protector Act, the Public Protector has discretionary power to say yes or no. When somebody complains under the Executive Members Ethics Act, the Public Protector must investigate.
It is a plan that is going to
At the time, there was what you would call prima facie evidence that the Guptas had a relationship with the president, his son, Duduzane Zuma, and the rest of the family. And that relationship had been utilized to privilege companies that were co-owned by the president's son and the Guptas in terms of state contracts and support whenever they had problems, such as having problems with the banks, etc. Of course, the complaint was that if there was such a questionable relationship, it would be in violation of the Executive Ethics Code, which requires the president or any member of the executive not to use their power or information they have to advance their interests or interests of people they are connected with or related to.
I do not think that I had any other one-on-one meetings with Mrs. Zuma other than the ones referred to above.
State Capture Commission was like lancing a boil. We had all this information. The press had done amazing work. The media had done amazing work. Political parties had done amazing work. The Democratic Alliance had laid all these charges. All this information was available, and there was nowhere to go with it. We were making no progress with the police. The National Prosecuting Authority was completely and utterly defunct. At that point, they were, they were doing very little of any note, and the State Capture Commission consolidated all that information.
The Gupta brothers left in 2018. Today is 2023. We still do not know how they left, when did they leave, and how so. And it was like there was no clear rules and regulations in relation to the rules of conduct in as far as that is concerned. I think that is the genesis of the problem.
The Guptas became the fugitives after the delivery of the state capture report. Remember that the state capture report, or the State Capture Commission, had, amongst others, to investigate the New Lane as well as the Estina Dairy Project in the Free State province. And as a matter of fact, they were requested to come and testify at the State Capture Commission, and they did not want to participate in the proceedings of the State Capture Report because there was already a case opened up or case registered for those two corruption cases in the Free State. They then decided to make a beeline for country A. Country A in this instance is the UAE.
At this stage, how much are you able to tell us? What do we know about the status of the Guptas?
So indeed, we can confirm, as we have done through our statement, that through the law enforcement agencies of the Emirati government, we've been informed that they have been captured and they're in custody. And so from here, what then follows is more cooperation, and then we would now start to begin the extradition process.
Were they ever arrested? Did we ever get to know the prison that they were arrested in, the case number, what were the charges, what exactly were they faced with, are they out on bail? All those questions were very, very important. But this is not an ordinary case.
The only evidence we have is the note verbal, which is the formal communication between the two central authorities. After they were arrested, as we mentioned previously, they sent us a note verbal confirming that they were arrested, that they were in prison, and up to now, that is what we were informed, that they were arrested, and that is the only evidence that we have, that they were arrested.
The extradition request for the Gupta brothers that has been denied by a UAE court. Justice Minister Ronald Lamola says he was caught off guard and is shocked by the decision. SA authorities were not aware of the court matter. Government says it will now be engaging its counterparts in the UAE to ensure this dismissal is appealed.
Well, it's quite disappointing to me and fellow South Africans that the process of accountability seems to be floundering. I'm not surprised though, Paul, because state capture was a monster with multiple tentacles. And when the big guys were disengaged, they were not chopped. Until there's accountability, those tentacles have just been disengaged and not chopped. They still have the ability to control people inside the system on the basis of aces they hold against them if they put these people in positions of power. And secondly, if they already committed certain offenses with people who are in the system, it then becomes difficult for some of the people they left in the system not to dance when they are told to dance.
One of the general principles of international law, in as far as extradition is concerned, is that a crime that the fugitives are being extradited for should be recognized as such by both countries. So South Africa and UAE do agree that crimes have been committed. That is the point number one. But another thing is that South Africa and the United Arab Emirates are parties, are signatories to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And this convention mandates the two countries to work together on issues of mutual legal assistance, on issues of exchanging of notes, criminalization, asset recovery. One of the extradition requirements is that once the names of the suspects have been mentioned, once the charges have been included, and once it is made clear, when it is confirmed that these people ought to be arrested and be brought back to the country, a warrant of arrest needs to be included. And it would appear that in the current given set of facts, that was missing. And that is one of the bases that apparently the UAE found that it did not meet the sufficient legal requirements.
We find it shocking that such a technicality has been cited when all these efforts have been put by us. And that's why I went through the timelines of what we did and what happened between our central authority and the central authorities of the UAE. But as I read Article 17 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, even if that was the case, the authority, even if they had a technicality problems, the authorities in the UAE, in terms of this Article 17, should have still required clarity from our authorities that there is this issue, for example, of the warrant that was cancelled, which could have been easily explained by the NDPP as she's explaining now to them, because the correct warrant is still there. They could have been able to get clarity.
If it didn't succeed, because the documentation wasn't up to scratch, then someone is to blame. That doesn't mean they did it on purpose. It doesn't mean that their head should get chopped off, but it means that we failed, and that's not good enough. So we have to do better. Is it the end of the road? Hell no. The Guptas need to be found. They need to be arrested. They need to be brought back here, and they need to face the music. So the ordinary South Africans are demanding.
My impressions would be that the UAE has no respect for South African government, as well as the organizations or authorities responsible for the process of extradition. This would be the Department of Justice and the NPA. How could or what must we learn when a court sits in February and decides that the application is turned down for the fugitives to be handed over to South Africa, and they do not communicate that court's decision with the South African law enforcement authorities, in this case, the Department of Justice and the NPA?
We are at a point where then South Africa can explore two options. One, it can appeal the judgment, the extradition outcome by the UAE, and make a compelling reason to advance to the UAE that bringing back the Guptas is firstly in the interest of justice to South Africa, that the Guptas will not be subjected to any human rights violations, but more importantly, that the extradition proceedings of the Guptas back to South Africa will assist in as far as assisting of the courts is concerned. Another option would be to start the extradition proceedings from the scratch, make a fresh application.
The next opportunity, if the appeal fails, obviously, will be to reassess whether we can present a new request, but also I think the diplomatic engagement. And I think members of the media will note that this year, the conference of the state parties on the UN Convention Against Corruption will be taking place. That's another avenue at an international level that we can pursue, with a possibility of having the conference pass a resolution, mainly impressing on the need for countries like the UAE to cooperate and work with other states to assist in this respect.
It's very clear that the Guptas are using whatever possible influence they could to make sure that they don't come to the country. I don't think we'll ever see them facing justice in the country, and that makes me really sad, but I don't think that's the end of the story. We still need to make sure that those who assisted them to steal state funds in the country must still face the music.
I guess it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, the moral arc of the universe may be long, but it always bends towards justice. And therefore, there will be accountability day for the Gupta Zuma families